I go, I'm putting on. Putting on, putting on. Everywhere I go, I'm putting on. Putting on, putting on. Everywhere I go, I'm putting on. Putting on. Where you from?
Welcome to Popcorn Sports on the Popcorn Entertainment Network. I'm your host, Mike Kyle, and welcome back to yet another episode of our Why You Should Root for Every Team in the NBA. I, of course, am not alone in this series. I am joined by Tony East at TEastNBA on Twitter. He covers the Indiana Pacers. He's the editor-in-chief for 8points9seconds.com and also host of the Locked On Pacers podcast. How you doing, Tony? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing good, man. It's been raining in Indy for about 3 straight days, so nice to do something a little brighter and less dull.
Right, absolutely. And hey, in Cleveland, it's been relatively the same here. So my first question is, how did you begin to cover the Pacers?
Yeah, I grew up about 30 minutes north of Indianapolis, so the team's always been close by. But growing up, before I was the I don't know what to call it. The fan of the sport that I am. I actually did have a favorite team, but I will not reveal who it is on the show. But it wasn't the Pacers. You know, if you'll recall, they had the brawl in 2004.
Yep, of course.
And they were really good at that time, but I was only 8 or 9, I think, when that happened. And then they traded away a bunch of guys. Reggie retired. And they were really terrible for about 6 years, and they were known for having some less than stellar character guys on the team. They would all go out after the games and things like that. Meanwhile, the Colts were just amazing. So nobody really liked the Pacers when I was growing up. It was all Colts, Butler basketball, stuff like that.
Right,
so
absolutely.
I didn't really get into them until I got to college. I went to IU in Bloomington, and I finally latched on to a sport, which was basketball, mostly because of IU basketball. But I started to like the NBA more and more and more. And then when I got out of college, I wanted to cover the team because I live in Indianapolis now. So it all worked out perfectly for me.
Right, absolutely. And hey, when you're growing up in 2004 and stuff, Peyton Manning's all the range up there. Not so much the Pacers, so I understand completely. With that, let's transition now into just some general overview of the Pacers. So they joined the NBA in 1976. They are named the Pacers after the pace car in racing, obviously the Indianapolis 500 up there, as well as the Pacer horse breed. Obviously, just the whole racing scene in general, doesn't really matter what it is so big up in Indiana in and of itself. Their colors are navy and yellow. They have 25 playoff appearances, 0 NBA championships, and they play in the Central Division with Cleveland, Milwaukee, Chicago, and Detroit. So obviously you said that you kind of got late into the game with the Pacers. But what is that dynamic, or what was that dynamic like just kind of coming up with the Pacers? Obviously you had the Colts and Peyton Manning, like I mentioned earlier. So how was that transition changed a little bit here?
People love basketball in Indiana. That's why it took a long time for the Pacers to really fully fade out. In the pre Frank Vogel and his Jim O'Brien as the coach, and they were just kind of bland. It still took a long time for people to really stop really being into the team. It's just the way Indiana is just so basketball oriented. And
right.
The Pacers haven't picked inside the top 10 in the NBA draft since the 1980s. Like, they always are at least a decent basketball team who draws people in. And even before that stretch I just kind of referenced, when they drafted Reggie and then got Smits, and they were really good for 15 years. They had Chuck Person, who was amazing, and then they were one of the best ABA teams, and they've always been good enough to draw people in. So it took a really long time for people to fade out in the mid-2000s. So it was very strange just seeing that go down. And then the Colts won that Super Bowl, and that just solidified it. But then when Peyton Manning left, and around the same time that Danny Granger won his Most Improved Player award, I think that sucked a lot of people back in and brought the team back to relevancy in the city. And now they're, of course, booming with the hometown hero, Victor Oladipo, on the team.
Absolutely, and we will get into the Pacers fan base in just a few minutes. But hey, you just kind of mentioned it, and that's a perfect segue into last season. 48-34, fifth seed in the East, They lost to the Cavs in the first round. I was able to see that series up close and personal. I worked for the Cavs during the playoffs, got to meet Victor Oladipo, Lance Stephenson, who is no longer on the team, RIP. And I just kind of talking to those guys and some of the other players around the organization, I really just liked what they were about. And obviously they kind of had, the underdog mentality of the NBA, especially in the postseason, taking the Cavs to 7 games. What was last season like for you?
Yeah, it was really interesting because, it was a tough season to anticipate happening. Going into it, I think everybody thought they were going to be not very good, including me. I ran through the schedule before the year, and made some sort of prediction, if you want to call it that, for every game, and I had him at like 28 or 29 wins. I can't even remember. So I know nothing apparently about predicting wins and losses because, I mean, they just were awesome. They were winning every game at the start of the year. Sabonis looked like he was going to be one of the best centers in the NBA. Like, he made every single shot he took for his first 3 games of the season. You know, they had everybody clicking, and like, even if you weren't like all in for the team being really good and it was just a fluke, it was like really fun because they were just pulling these games out. And then, you know, around Christmas time, finally it hit everybody like, okay, they're actually a very good team, which is, you know, it's hard to like gather that when every single national person has just drilled them in rankings, and like even the local papers are like, you know, it's a rebuilding year, and all of a sudden it's not. You know, everyone is wrong. It's so hard to wrap your head around that. So it took a while for everyone to come around, which was pretty interesting to see. But yeah, it became really cool, the whole story in general. Like, every single game you'd go in and be like, are they, you know, I know they're good, but are they like really good? You know, it's like hard to grapple with that in your own head. But after, yeah, you know, everybody came around, they figured out they were good, and then it was just all like, because the surprise part was over, it was just fun, you know? It was awesome to watch and enjoy.
Right. The
whole team loved each other. They played a fun brand of basketball. Like, all their games were close, which is why they were kind of fun basketball too. I think they had like over 20 games within 5 points this season, which is kind of scary going forward, but that's another question. But, you know, it's just fun. It makes you want to watch it because you're like, oh, anything could happen, you know, and they just pulled out more of those games they lost and ended up being a really fun year for the team. So that, you know, I think that all that accumulated to making it a really fun season to cover. In the playoffs, they almost pulled off one of the great upsets of our time, really. I mean, it doesn't seem like getting a 5-4 series, but beating LeBron James in the conference playoffs is just nuts.
Right.
So, yeah, it was something else. I'm glad you got to cover it in the Cleveland end because, you know, you got to see how crazy that series shook out to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually want to just spend a few moments talking about that series because I remember Game 7. Game 7 was in Cleveland, and I was just kind of up, and I was, you know, just like walking around the arena, and like, it was so, like, you could hear a pin drop. Everybody in Cleveland was just terrified. Like, and it was really weird because it's like, all right, the Cavs have LeBron, like, we're in a good spot. But there was just this feeling that Indiana could put the dagger into this city and LeBron would go, and obviously he did. But I just remember walking, like, during, like, the national anthem, it was just like, there was an eerie darkness that Indiana could just be Thor, come out of the sky and choke slam the Cavs out of the playoffs. Just, so give me your thoughts on just that series and how it progressed and obviously how they took them to 7 games.
Yeah, it's it. You know, the magnitude of it was what really stood out to me so much. Like, like you
Right.
said with LeBron, like, everybody in Cleveland thought he could stay if they made it to the finals, but he was gone if they didn't. Like, it was hard to fathom, like, oh my gosh, if the Pacers win this, like, that changes the entire NBA. And
Absolutely.
It ended up not being a difference maker because he left anyway. Sorry, to you know, poke that. But
that's cool.
You know, it was crazy. Like, thinking of it in that magnitude. You know, even beyond, like, this is a 5-4 series. Like, it's supposed to be close, but you're not supposed to win because you're the 5 seed, and then, you know, they blew them out of Game 1, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, they could do this. And then, you know, Game 3, it looked like it was going to turn back to Cleveland, and then Bojan Bogdanovic out of nowhere becomes the best small forward in the NBA. Like, things just kept looking awesome, and then they got Game 6, they blew them out. Like, all of a sudden it was like, okay, they just have to put one more game together. They can beat LeBron. They've got the mental side. You know, they could do this. It was a really crazy experience, and, you know, just game by game, you just never knew it was going to happen. But, I mean, I think what we learned a lot of in that game is, one, the Pacers are a pretty good playoff team, and 2, LeBron James is a very, very, very good basketball player.
Good job, Captain Obvious, right there. So let's just kind of break down this roster a bit. You obviously have Victor Oladipo returning, who just broke out of his shell for the first time really in his career last season. Myles Turner, a young up-and-coming big man. Thad Young, Sabonis, who you already mentioned, Bogdanovic, Aaron Holiday, Darren Collison, TJ Leaf, hopefully going to take that next step. Signed Tyreek Evans and brought in Doug McDermott. Kind of break down this roster for me here.
Yeah, you know, pretty similar to last year in terms of, I think they're going to rock the same starting 5, and I don't think you'll see that much of a drop in minutes from anyone in that group. Maybe, you know, the not Victor Oladipo, Myles Turner guys might see 1 or 2 minutes go down, but nothing so crazy that it looks like a different team. But off the bench is where this team is really kind of transformed. You know, Corey Joseph's really the only stable returnee doing the same thing as last year because Sabonis, you know, they want him and Turner playing together, so it seems like he's going to play a bit more power forward this year. They're going to try to do 2 centers at the same time just to try to, you know, see if they can have that as a future thing, or if they need to make a roster move, figure
Right.
something out. That's a different thing, but they're going to be playing him a little differently this year. Kyle O'Quinn is going to be in the center rotation in the Al Jefferson role, just coming in when they need injury assurance. Al Jefferson now plays in China. Kyle O'Quinn is still in the NBA, so clearly an improvement there. Last year, their backup small forward was Damian Wilkins for 2.5 months, who is no longer in the NBA as well. And then Glenn Robinson III when he returned from injury. But I think Doug McDermott is, offers them different skills. I think him and Glenn Robinson III at peak health have similar impacts, but he offers them skills that they need in three-point shooting and cutting and size. And he plays really the same style as Bojan Bogdanovic, so they don't really miss any beat or style when they make a sub. I think that was attractive to them. So their backup three rotation is different. I wouldn't say it's better or worse. And then the big one, and the most notable for everyone around the league, Lance Stevenson is no longer on the team, and I'll go on the record of saying I think he's one of the worst 5 NBA players.
I'm with you. Good guy. I will say, great guy. Loved him. But yeah, I agree with you on that take.
Yeah, he's just very bad, very unimpactful. Maybe bad. He's very talented. Obviously, he's in the NBA, but he's unimpactful to winning. And I wish him the best in Los Angeles. I think he'll be back in Indiana someday. But today is not that day. I think, it's better off for the team that he's not here as they try to move into the foray of being a successful team. And they replaced him with a very good basketball player, Tyreke Evans, who's going to be the one who eats into the minutes of Bojan Bogdanovic and Darren Collison a little bit because he can play with the 1, the 2, and the 3. He'll be a huge spark off the bench for this team. I think, he is what's going to transform them the most because the benches where they really struggled, Corey Joseph and Lance Stevenson doesn't make much sense together on the court. But I think Tyreke Evans works well with everyone. So I think that's really what's going to change him. And ultimately it's going to be a lot of the same stylistic rotation as last year, just with improved players in most spots.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've noted. It's just like if you look at, who they brought in, it kind of just adds to like their wings galore that they had last year. They were really winging guard heavy team. And so if you just look at the piece that they brought in, obviously Reek, Doug, it's just like they fit the mold for what Nate wants to do.
Yeah, they do. And, he's a very defensive-oriented guy, both from his playing days back in Portland. It's just how he is. It's not so much defensive-oriented like we're going to be the best defensive team in the league. It's just like we center around defense, leading to offense, and things like that.
Right, and it's also just kind of like a grinded out thing, which is something I will touch on a bit later.
Yeah, and that strategy doesn't work for every team. You have to have the right personnel for it. And if you had told me last year they were going to be a grinded out team, I would have said they just signed Darren Collison and Bojan Bogdanovic. No way. But it worked really well. The pace worked well for everybody, and I think they still have great personnel for that. And McMillan is great at coaching it. He's a player development genius. It's really his thing, and he gets them to play their roles to the best of their abilities. So I believe in him doing that. He got that extension this summer. I don't know if you were going to bring that up later, but I think he's the right man for this team. Maybe not to bring them to a title, but to bring them, farther forward along in their competitive journey, which is always, I think that's always the right move. But yeah, they're probably going to be a little bit better on defense than on offense, but good defense leads to easy offensive opportunities, and that was kind of what led them to be so solid last year.
Well, I was going to bring it up, but you pretty much just covered it, so thank you. I appreciate that, knocking that out real quick right there. But give me one player or maybe two guys that you're really looking forward to seeing this year.
Yes. One is Tyreke Evans because I think two things. One, I think, he just upgrades their bench so much that it's going to be awesome to watch him fit in. And I think, he could take their bench to like one of the best 5 in the league. He's that level of a scorer. He's a really good perimeter defender. He's not a great inside the three-point line defender, but that's a different story. But I think it'll be interesting to see how much he juices up a second unit that struggled to create shots. And I think his fit next to Victor Oladipo is the other thing that I'm really excited to see. Vic's biggest struggle against the Cavs, as you saw a million times, they double-teamed him every single time. He'd get the ball, in the slot or on the wing, and he would pick up his dribble too much, or he didn't know where to throw it, and it caused a lot of problems. I think now having a safety valve in the form of Tyreke Evans is really gonna, scare teams away from doing that as much. And Victor knows, as soon as a trap comes, he's gonna get rid of it and throw it to Tyreke. So I think that's gonna work out really nicely. The other guy I'm really interested in, it's for the opposite reason really, is TJ Leaf because postseason press conference, Kevin Pritchard was beating this drum of like, they need a stretch 4, they need a guy who can do this, that, at the power forward position. I'm like, well, you have TJ Leaf, who's supposed to be this good shooter, And I'm not really interested to see Leaf because I think he's going to be super helpful as a contributor, but mostly to see if he's made enough steps that I feel like he could be an NBA player someday, because his rookie year was a disaster. I mean,
yeah, it was bad last year.
Yeah, it was so bad. He shot well from three, and that's literally the only great NBA skill that he showed. And he only took like 40-something attempts. Like, he took so few attempts that if he had missed one more, he would have shot under 40% from three. So it's kind of fluky to discuss how successful he was as a rookie. So I am interested to see if he takes any steps forward. I think his summer league could have been better, but they were trying to do things that aren't really his skills. So I'm just interested to see how he shakes out, because that could turn out to be a wasted pick, and I would like them to treat it as such if it's going to look like that, but we'll see.
All right, so now let's shift gears now to just the fan base and the culture surrounding the Indiana Pacers. The first thing I want to say is that obviously, for whatever reason, and I'm not sure why this is, because basketball was created, a little bit more up north, but Indiana kind of has the reputation as the home of basketball. So can you please explain this to me?
Yes, I can. I don't know why it's so loved in this state, but it is. It goes way back to the ABA Pacers days. IU basketball's always been good. There's always been one program or team just at the forefront of like great basketball in the state, whether it be the Hoosiers, the Pacers, or Butler. And the one downtime that both the Pacers and IU were bad, right after the Kelvin Sampson scandal and the Pacers brawl, Butler was just having these magical Final Four championship game runs where Brad Stevens was like, he could have run for mayor and won in this state. Like, there's always just something good going on in that sport here, and that's I don't know if that's exactly why people love it, but it's just always been one of the most popular sport in the state. And now they have embraced the "We Girl Basketball Here" mantra, which I love. It's so much different than anything they did before. They're finally embracing one of the state's things instead of just going with like blue collar gold swagger, which I liked, but it's just different. So it's really cool to see them embrace that mentality and show that they are one of the best, if not the best, Midwestern team at developing talent and being a basketball state.
Right, and it's crazy that you just brought up the blue collar, because literally in my show notes, I have this team is very representative of the Indiana blue collar culture, and that is a direct quote from my show document. So, I mean, I think it's true, though. Like, as cliche as it is, and we talked about it earlier, it's just like the team and the fan base, it's just the whole grind it out culture that even Nate brought in. And just like they've just wrapped their arms around it, So it's not like it's just like some made up shtick. It's like it's there.
Yeah, the blue collar gold swagger era was super awesome. Like, I'm not trying to demean that in any way. It was just like so different compared to the basketball culture you get in the state all the time. The thing is like that team was so not like fresh off the whole like thug era, is it's kind of known as of the Pacers basketball, but it was like close enough that it took a while for the people really to buy in and be like, wow, this team is really freaking good at basketball. They made 2 Eastern Conference Finals in a row before finally everybody really bought into them.
Yeah, right, absolutely. I mean, hey, if you want to go back to the thug era of the Pacers, Jamal Tinsley, Jermaine O'Neal, Steven Jackson, and Ron Artest, that is a great core for an NBA back alley team. What do you think of the Pacers fans in general? Give me some insight there.
Yeah, I think Pacers fans are actually a pretty smart fan base, but I also think they're, because it's a good development basketball state, they're kind of entrenched in things that aren't as important anymore. I'm a big fundamentals guy. Like, I loved Tim Duncan and stuff like that, and I think a lot of people in Indiana are that way too, because we've had a lot of good coaches coming through the pipeline in various ways, but it also gets a lot of fans in like the mid-range shot is still a good shot, and things like that are no longer the case in basketball. They haven't gotten over the hump of into the modern game. Excuse me, I keep burping. I don't know why. But they, they haven't humped into the modern game just yet, and it's not saying they're behind. They're just, in a different era of their mindset when enjoying the sport. But overall, they're just very invested in like good basketball and seeing things go like technically sound, which I really like. And at the same time, they're a very passionate group. You see a lot of familiar faces at every game. And it's not, it's very good community feeling now. They finally reached that, and I think the fans love that.
I think making the point that the Pacers have smart fans, for me at least, if I'm trying to decide to root for an NBA team, is really attractive. Just because, as for myself, I'm always like the very rational. All right, let's not get too tilted, let's not get too high. I try and keep things pretty even keel. And so for you to bring up off the bat, hey, we got a group of smart fans, I'm all in just off that.
Yeah, I wish that could like pull in, like, how players get recruited in free agency. I wish you could like recruit fans, and be like, hey, if you're
you can. hey, you can recruit fans because this is what this series is for.
I'm recruiting fans. That's true. I saw that Knicks fan like sold his fandom or whatever on the internet for like $3,000.
Yeah, I did see that. Yeah.
So people have to pay me to become a fan of this team. That's what I'm hearing here, right?
Yeah, pretty much, right?
I like what we're doing here.
So all right. So let's kind of take this a step further there. I'm sure you're kind of somewhat, or at least remotely, into Pacers Twitter. Obviously, the subculture and the subgroups of Twitter are a big thing in the NBA. So what can you tell me about Pacers Twitter?
Pacers Twitter is awesome. I like a lot of the dudes in there. Like the fans, they're very communicative. They love basketball. I think in general it's a very sports, fandom-y state because there's not a lot to do here.
Right.
But you get a lot of collaborative talking and things like that. But the problem is this is where the fundamental stuff comes in. It's like your older heads don't like Myles Turner at all because he's not a good rebounder, he's not a good post player, things like that were more effective in previous eras of basketball. But your new heads love Myles Turner because he's good at the new era stuff and he spaces the floor, he's a good shot blocker, things like that. So you get a lot of feuding about big men, like all the time, No one really disagrees about many other guys on the team, but when it comes to the centers, all the time you hear Turner's good, Turner's awful, Sabonis should start over, like all sorts of takes from all over the road. And if you're going to join Pacers Twitter, let me tell you got to do your research on the big men because you will be talking about them all season long.
What are your thoughts on the big men?
Oh, I mean, I like them both. I really like Sabonis because I like good passing bigs who are smart. He's a really good screener. He can bowl down the lane. He's a great rebounder. He's a really good center. But I like Myles Turner more, and I like his potential more. Just for the reasons I mentioned a second ago, he's an elite rim protector already. Led the league in blocks per game last year. Would have probably led the league in total blocks if we didn't miss so many games due to various injuries. He can shoot the three pretty well. He's jacked now, too. If you haven't seen his offseason, he's ripped. And, him and Sabonis are doing yoga together. But he's just a modern big. And I think if he really polishes all of his skills, people keep asking him for a bigger role. I don't think he'd be better in a bigger role. I think if he just polishes his skills in his current role, he could be one of the most impactful centers in the league. So I really like what he can do, and I think he fits really well next to pretty much any amount of talent, or any group of talent, excuse me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's just one of those guys where you can just kind of throw into a lineup, and he will eventually, if all things, if he rounds out his game, like you said, he's a little bit raw right now. But he's just one of those guys, like you throw him onto the court, like once he kind of knows his role and once he gets comfortable, he'll be good to go.
Yeah, exactly, and that's great for the team. I think they're going to keep him around into his next contract because, no matter what the next era of Pacers basketball looks like, I think Myles Turner fits in and will be a part of it. Even if he wants to go back to Texas for whatever reason eventually, I think for the next, foreseeable future, he's going to be in Indiana.
I think so, too. And with that, we're going to wrap this up right here. Right now, you have 30 seconds to pitch anybody. Right now, this is where you can put your recruiting hat on. Become the Butler Brad Stevens, I should say, of the Pacers fandom right now. You have 30 seconds to pitch anybody why they should become a fan of the Pacers. Go ahead.
Okay, the Indiana Pacers just won 48 basketball games last year after being projected to win 28. After that, they lost 3 players to China. 3 of their players in their rotation are in the Chinese Basketball League now. They've replaced them with all NBA caliber players, to be clear there. They're going to be an extremely improved team over last year. They have the same coach. They have the same front office. They have the same superstar. They're just getting internal improvements. They have a lot of guys in contract years. The Pacers could be very good this year and very fun to watch. And with the Eastern Conference being as wide open as it was, let's review that they won the season series over the Celtics last year and the 76ers and were tied with the Raptors. So I think that it's going to be a good time to watch this team who could, in fact, be competing in the conference despite what people are saying.
That was incredible. Well said. There is one thing I want to add, though. You said that they were projected to win 28 games, and that projection was by you. This is not on anybody. These were your projections that they surpassed.
Their over-under was like 31.5, so I don't feel that crazy saying 28.
All right. And with that, we're going to get up out of here. This has been Mike Kyle and Tony East. You can follow him on Twitter at TEastNBA. He's the editor-in-chief of 8.9seconds.com, also the host of Locked On Pacers, the podcast that is. And Tony, you got anything else to plug?
I don't, man. You did a great job right there. Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. No problem. Hey, if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below for more content each and every day. And with that, we'll catch you next time. Thank you all so much for checking out today's video. If you are new here, click the video right above my head. It's going to give you all the details about the Popcorn Entertainment Network. If you want to see the latest video from this series, click the upper left-hand corner and be sure to check all the boxes down to the left of me. That includes subscribing, get your butt in the bucket, We'd love to have you as part of our community. Hit that like button, share it with a friend, interact with us down below in the comments section, and last but not least, check out our website, popcornent.com, where we post all new and exclusive content. And lastly, be sure to follow us on all of our social media at popcornentnet on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, we'll see you next time.